I was going through previous year question paper, तो ग्लोबलाइजेशन से for last 2-3 years क्वेश्चन नहीं आया है, right? एक पहले ग्लोबलाइजेशन डिस्कस कर लेते हैं from perspective of 17 means globalization is important, right? Because and in general also, if you observe world over, right, national governments are now retrieving from their global integration and global responsibilities, right? Global integration and global responsibilities, right? And both European, particularly European and American, isn't it? European countries, many countries like Britain may Brexit, right? Support for Brexit, right? Exit from Europe, right? European Union, right? या फिर Trump tendency, right? Tendencies of Trump, right? After his triumph, Mr. Trump is, now retrieving from global responsibilities and global American integration of American society with the globe, right? So in that context also, next year in both essay and society, globalization and its effects on Indian society is important. In fact, now tendency is visible in world society. We are witnessing a process of deglobalization. Recently, there were articles also published on deglobalization, right? Most of the European countries and Americans, they are now adopting, protectionist measures. America first, right? Britain first, right? These are, protectionist measures actually, right? And these are tendencies of, their retrieval from global responsibilities, and the process of globalization are being hindered. In fact, many theorists are now referring this as a process of deglobalization. Now in society, in world society, the process of deglobalization has started, right? So we will discuss, in syllabus UPSC has mentioned paper 1 mein effects of globalization. So what is globalization? What are its different dimensions, and what are effects of globalization on Indian society, that we will discuss. This is important for both essay as well as society. Essay mein, you will see regular globalism versus nationalism. There was a topic in year 2009, right? So this topic is always important. Globalization is topic important for essay point of view also, right? Globalization is a process, right? Globalization is a process, right? Globalization, its effects or impact Indian society, on Indian society. So broadly, we should understand its effects, right, on social structure, right? Social structures may institutional framework. When you are asked to write, in general, effects of globalization, right? So you should write in institutional framework, right? Or you should write in a structural framework. You can say a structural framework, right? Its impact on different structures of society, right? And social structure consists of institutions, values. Institutions may we have 5 primary institutions. Family, to effects on family, effects on economy, effects on polity, right? Decision making, authority, right? Effects on education, right? Effects on religion, right? One of the effects of globalization is rise in fundamentalism, right? वो भी effect ही है. We will discuss how rise in fundamentalism is related with globalization, right? Okay. Also, effects on culture, right? Cultural basically, cultural effects or impacts, right? So we will discuss. In fact, values also, changed, right? Community value, national value to global value, isn't it? Right? Post globalization, right? अगर example आप देखें तो post globalization, after LPG, liberalization, privatization and globalization, right? You will find कि youth are more cosmopolitan. Youth became more cosmopolitan. The orientation of youth, became more cosmopolitan, global in nature, right? Less concerned about the local culture and more fascination for global culture. American dreams, right? American dreams is example of, fascination for global culture. And those dreams are now being crushed by army of Trump, right? Right. Recently, 2 days back also, one person from Hyderabad killed in, right? Right. So, but after LPG, what we saw, changes in cultural preferences also, right? Orientations also, right? In society, from local to cosmopolitan, local, national to cosmopolitan, global orientation, right? Global orientation in for economic, pursuits, right? Global orientation. Okay, we will discuss, effects. First, we will start with, understanding what is globalization. ये है क्या? What is globalization? क्या होता है आपके पास जनरल अंडरस्टैंडिंग आपकी क्या होती है ग्लोबलाइजेशन पे? Because this is not a new word, this is not a new concept, this is not a new term, right? हाँ, tell me. Integration of the domestic economy, but we cannot limit globalization to economic integration. हाँ, economic sense में. Okay, fine, economic sense में. Yes. Define कीजिए globalization. Global village. हाँ, ठीक है, ये भी. Look, the root word of, समझिएगा, कभी भी खासकर if you are writing essay on globalism, so you should start from the beginning, right? The root word in globalization, the root word in process of globalization is globe, right? Right? So, theoretically, we trace the process of globalization with the invention of globe. With invention of globe, I guess you are aware of, with invention of globe, discovery of world started, right? Like America was discovered by Europeans after invention of globe, right? India was discovered by a new route for trade and commerce was discovered by Europeans with the east, right? Vasco da Gama, discovered a new route, sea route for trade and commerce with the east, isn't it? In 1498, right? In the last years of 15th century, Columbus discovered a sea route. In fact, he discovered a new continent, right? American continent, isn't it? Right. So, and with the help of what? With the help of globe, right? Agar globe nahi aata, if globe would not have been invented, then perhaps this route would not have been discovered, isn't it? So, globe, right? The process started with discovery of routes, isn't it? Commercial revolution. The process of globalization started with discovery of routes, commercial revolution, isn't it? But its impact was very low, right? The interconnectedness was mostly commercial in nature. Interconnectedness was generally commercial in nature, as well as for the purpose of colonization, isn't it? Domination, colonization, right? With discovery of routes, with growth of trade and commerce, Europeans established their colonies in different parts of India, right? They established their colonies in different parts of India. They dominated, different parts of the world. They dominated Africans, Indians by establishing their colonies after discovery of routes, right? In 20th century, the term globalization came in literary usage in late 60s. In 20th century, the term globalization came in literary usage in late 60s, and as a process after establishment of world institutions during World War II, right? And post World War, initiation by the world institution, post World War, role of the world institution like World Bank, IMF in reconstruction of the world, right, which was distorted, world society which was distorted because of World War, right, required free movement of people, free movement of goods, free movement of services, and further these institutions promoted trade and commerce. So as a process, we see globalization a post-war phenomena in 20th century, and particularly as a process it became more visible in 1970s or 70s, right, when many European countries, particularly East European countries, opened their markets, right, for the world trade. China opened his market in 1978 for the world trade, isn't it? Right. By end of the 80s, right, many Asian countries, particularly Southeast Asian countries, opened their markets, opened their society for world trade and commerce, right? So as a process, what we see as a process, right, globalization in 20th century started in late in 70s. In literary usage, it came in 60s, and as a process, it started in 70s. And most of the nation states of the world, of this globe, right, opened their societies and markets, right, for global integration by 90s, by end of the 90s, isn't it? Right. As a process, globalization refers to interconnectedness, social, economic, political, cultural interconnectedness, right, over the globe. Interconnect, it refers to, it's a process of interconnectedness, right? आप नोट करना चाहिएगा तो नोट कर लीजिएगा. Globalization refers to a process of increasing global interconnectedness. Increasing global interconnectedness. It refers to a process of increasing global interconnectedness. It refers to the trend towards trends towards interchange of economic, social, cultural, political, technological attributes that takes place between societies, interchange of economic, social, cultural, political, technological attributes that takes place between societies when different societies come into contact with each other. When different societies come into contact with each other. Though this interchange is going on for time immemorial, though this interchange is not a new phenomena, right? This interchange is going on for the time immemorial. This process was termed as globalization. For the first time around second half of 20th century. Second half of 20th century, particularly in 1970s and 1980s. Right. So right, ये तो समझ में आ गया ना कि when we will discuss effects of globalization on Indian society in a structural term. ठीक है, अभी let us briefly understand the theory. Concept तो आपको समझ में आ गया कि this refers to interconnectedness, isn't it? This refers to increasing interchange in terms of what? Interchange of social, economic, cultural, political, technological attributes, right, from different countries when they come into contact with each other, isn't it? This is concept of globalization as a process. Globalization is not the outcome, but it's a process. Globalization is a process, right? Globalism is the outcome. The ideology of globalism is the outcome. Globalization is a process, right? Now, theoretically, we count on many agents of ग्लोबलाइजेशन, एक ऐसा ड्रॉ कर लीजिएगा, राइट। ग्लोबलाइजेशन agents, right? First, second, third, fourth. This I'm explaining for the purpose of writing essay. आप जब essay लिखें, right, तो please write this. बाकी हमारा syllabus तो effects of globalization is there in society, on Indian society, ठीक है, लेकिन ये तो आपको जानना चाहिए concept of globalization as well as forces of globalization. The first इधर mention strategic globalization. Strategic globalization agents, either strategic globalization, agents of strategic globalization. There are different forms of globalization, typifications of globalization, right? Strategic globalization agents. Who are the agents of strategic globalization? World superpowers. Yes, very true. World superpowers, right? G8, for example, Group 8, right? A group of developed countries, developed nation, isn't it? World superpower, comma, NATO, 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 a strategic globalization, right? Globalization for, they promoted globalization for each other's, protection from the enemies, right? Strategic, that is referred as, a strategic globalization, right? Formation of NATO, agent, right? Superpower, comma, the world organizations like NATO, etc. बस इतना, उससे ज्यादा मत जानिए. Corporate globalization, corporate globalization. Second, corporate globalization. Agents of corporate globalization, agents, second, इधर लिखिएगा agents, right? International banks, multilateral corporations, transnational enterprises, international banks, multilateral corporations, transnational enterprises, right? Multinational corporations, you can say multinational corporations. For example, PepsiCo, right? Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, isn't it? This Reebok, right? ये सब क्या है? These are, they have promoted corporate globalization, right? Corporate, they have championed corporate globalism and they have promoted corporate globalization, right? Third, economic and financial global management or economic and financial globalization. Third इस कैटेगरी में लिखिएगा economic and financial globalization. Agents, international financial institutions. International financial institutions. Economic and financial globalization. Economic and financial institution. For example, World Trade Organization. Agents में World Trade Organization, international financial institutions, right? IMF, etc. International financial institution are the agents of such type of globalization, right? Economic and financial globalization. Fourth type, developmental globalization. Developmental globalization. Fourth type, developmental globalization. Either developmental globalization, right? Agents of developmental globalization, United Nations, right? United Nations, World Bank, agencies of United Nations like UNDP, etc. UNDP, etc. Then comes ecological globalization. Ecological globalization. Ecological globalization. Here agents of ecological globalization कौन होगा? UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program or Project, right? UNEP. UNCED, Global Environmental Facilities. UNCED, Global Environmental Facilities, etc. Next, media globalization or media globalism. Media globalization or media globalism. एजेंट्स कौन है इसके? BBC, CNN, BBC, CNN, right? Al Jazeera, right? Etc. Media globalization, media globalism, media globalization agents. Feminist globalization, feminist globalization, feminist globalism or feminist globalization agents. Feminist organization agents कौन है? Feminist organization. For example, World Sisterhood entities. Such entities, organized World Women Conference in Beijing, World Women Conference in Cairo, right? And championed the global concerns of women, global feminist concerns, right? तो उसको हम बोलते हैं feminist globalization, labor globalization और labor globalism, labor globalization, labor globalism, agents, international labor organization, इधर labor globalization, labor globalism, इधर agents, international labor organizations, trade union internationalism, etc. Catholic globalization. For example, Vatican, agent of globalization, Vatican. Many Catholic, education missionaries, right? NGOs, agents, right? Vatican City. Vatican is the supreme place of Catholic, Christianity, right? Vatican City in Italy, right? Islamic globalization. Next is Islamic globalization or Islamic globalism. Islamic globalization or Islamic globalism. Islamic globalization or Islamic globalism. Agents, ULMA, ulama politics, ulama world politics. Agents, ulama world politics. Consumer globalization. Agent, McDonald's, right? Through process of McDonaldization. It's a term actually, right? Increased popularity of, global food habits by multinational food giants, food corporations like McDonald's, isn't it? Coffee Cafe Day, right? They have, popularized consumer globalization, right? Or they have championed consumer globalism, right? Okay, the next and last, anti-globalism, anti-globalization, right? Agents of anti-globalism or anti-globalization are local, cultural, religious organization. Agents, local, cultural, religious organization. Okay, now ये हो गया आपका theoretically. जब भी if you write essay, please elaborate the topic, because essay में क्या होता है, you need to elaborate the topic, elaboration, then explanation and exemplification. Elaboration of the topic, explanation of the topic and exemplification, right? So while writing, on globalization, globalism versus nationalism, globalization, globalism, please refer to these aspects, right? These are different, forms of globalism, right? Discussed theoretically, right? Okay. Here our concern is effects of globalization on Indian society, impact of globalization on Indian society, right? So first we will start with, economic effects of globalization. Economic effects of globalization on Indian society. So one very popular and very much visible economic effect of globalization is, क्या है? Economic effect of globalization or economic impact of globalization is, टेल मी, आपको पता है इस टॉपिक में, मैं बस इसका सोशियोलॉजिकल एक्सप्लेनेशन कर देता हूं, आप आई गेस economic effect, economic impact of globalization, liberalization, right? Liberalization. First important economic impact of globalization is liberalization, and related effects, privatization, liberalization and privatization. When we refer, liberalization, right? We refer liberalization in a specific context, right? The context of liberalization of trade and commerce rules, right? Liberalization of, rules for or restrictions of establishment of companies, factories, right? Liberalization of labor laws, right? These are, different aspects of liberalization. Liberalization of, liberalization in rules of trade and commerce, or change in rules of trade and commerce. What kind of change? The change which facilitates for free flow of goods and services, isn't it? Right? Within the nation as well as between the nations, isn't it? This is what, liberalization refers, or liberalization means, right? Liberalization of rules, laws, right? For promotion of free flow of goods and services, isn't it? Right? So trade rules, right? Commerce rules for commerce were liberalized after, globalization, isn't it? When we adhered to the global society, right? When we opened up our markets, though the first, beginning of globalization we trace in liberalization of trade and commerce rules, right? As well as abolition of license Raj, right? Earlier, for establishment of, factories, industries, right? A lot of permissions were required, isn't it? License were required from different departments, right? Right. That license Raj was also abolished by liberalizing the rules and laws for establishment of factories, liberalizing, land acquisition, isn't it? Financial, mobilization, institutional support for establishment of rules and law for factories, industries, right? So that is also aspect of, as well as liberalization of laws, particularly labor laws, for minimizing trade unionism, isn't it? And trade union protests and movements, right? Trade unions, politics, isn't it? So liberalization refers not only liberalization of rules and laws for free flow of trade and commerce or establishment of factories, but also, to protect industries and to ensure, continuous supply of labor, isn't it? Like the bargaining with liberalization of, labor laws, the bargaining capacity of the laborers declined, isn't it? Right? And more power and authority was given to industrialists, corporates, right? In matters of, labor regulation, isn't it? Labor management. In fact, in matters of, corporate management. So this is, one effect, liberalization, isn't it? One economic effect. And this liberalization facilitated, right, growth of private industries, isn't it? Growth of private industries. Many, areas, the areas which earlier were reserved for public sector units, for government sector, those areas progressively were opened for private sector, right, after globalization, right. And आप अभी भी देखेंगे कि there are continuous, right, liberalization in norms, right, change in rules and norms for facilitation of private sector, right, है ना. जैसे अभी भी government has like 100%, so different caps, though for protection of the indigenous there had been different caps, right, कि 47% 49% investment, right, आपका 35%, isn't it, का cap, 26% का cap, there were different caps actually for protection, but progressively there has been decline in these caps. जो caps है कि पहले 72 मान लो, तो उसके बाद 49, isn't it, 26, so there is progressive decrease, right, and governments, public sector, right, has progressively receded or retrieved, right, from economic matters, right, particularly economic organization of work, or from organization of work. Earlier governments, public sector units had responsibility of employment generation, right. Governments receded from this role, and employment generation for employment, government promoted private industries through liberalization, isn't it, right. So this is referred as first important impact of globalization. Okay, एक ब्रीफ कर लीजिएगा, जितना हमने बात किया उसको पॉइंट वाइज. द मेन फीचर्स ऑफ लिबरलाइजेशन पॉलिसी ऑफ Indian society, the main features of liberalization policy in Indian society have been dash. First, general reduction in the role of state in economic governance of the society. General reduction in the role of the state in economic governance of the society. I guess it is understood now, right? जो economic governance था, right? Government earlier had higher say, right? State earlier had higher say in matters of trade, commerce, right? In matters of establishment of factories, companies. Government, state earlier had higher say, but after globalization, there had been general reduction in the role of state in economic governance of the society, in economic matters of the society, right? ये understood है? Yes, है ना? Understood है ये, right? Second, withdrawal of the state. Second, feature of liberalization policy is withdrawal of the state from some economic sectors, and its replacement by private sector. Withdrawal of the state from some economic sectors and its replacement by private sector. Third, decline of the government, public sectors in basic and key industries. अब ये भी I guess you understand, right? We decline in the government and public sector in basic and key industries. For example, banking industry, right? तो banking industry में governments, public sectors का decline हुआ है ना, right? Many private sector banks have been facilitated, allowed to run their operations in the country. This is also feature of liberalization policy, isn't it? Like earlier, insurance sector, LIC or different GIC, general insurance companies, right, under public sector undertakings, isn't it? But now insurance opened for private sector, है ना? Telecom earlier, key sector under government, isn't it? Opened for private sector, isn't it? So what we have seen continuous decline. We have seen continuous decline in government and public sector, right, in basic key industries, right? Okay, next, in fact many public sector undertakings may, what we see disinvestment. Government has disinvested, right, shares has been allocated to the private institutional investors or to the public, right? है ना, 10% का investment in BHEL, right? And many public sector units. And government has clear aim and agenda. आप देखिएगा present government का clear aim and agenda है, right? By end of their 5th year, they are going to disinvest major stakes in all profit-making public sector units to the private, right? क्योंकि जो agenda है इनका to mobilize the people next time in 2019, तो उस एजेंडे में एक्सपेंडिचर बहुत हाई है, राइट? डिफरेंट जो एजेंडा गवर्नमेंट का हमें दिखता है, ऑल फ्रॉम वॉर ऑल्सो वन ऑप्शन टू मोबिलाइज और टू गेन पॉपुलर सपोर्ट. इंडिया में ऐसा हुआ है, राइट? कारगिल वॉर से मतलब हाँ ठीक है, कारगिल वाज इंट्रूजन, नो प्रॉब्लम, लेकिन दैट वॉर मोबिलाइज पीपल बिहाइंड द गवर्नमेंट, राइट? गवर्नमेंट वोन एक इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर था इंडिया गवर्नमेंट का विच केम इन पावर अगेन आफ्टर कारगिल इन मिड टर्म इलेक्शन, तो वो था पॉपुलर सेंटिमेंट्स. अदर या फिर अभी लाइक जो फार्मर्स का अनरेस्ट इज देयर, ट्राइबल अनरेस्ट इज देयर, टू अपीज द फार्मर्स, टू अपीज द ट्राइबल्स, राइट? ह्यूज रिसोर्सेस आर रिक्वायर्ड, क्योंकि गलतियां तो सक्सेसिव गवर्नमेंट्स ने की है ना. और आज लाइक द प्रॉब्लम हैज एग्रावेटेड, इजंट इट, राइट? आप कहते हैं कि विल डबल द फार्मर्स इनकम. अरे फार्मर्स इनकम डबल कैसे होगा? मतलब ओनली वर्बलाइजेशन इज देयर विदाउट एनी पॉलिसी इंटरवेंशन, इजंट इट? पॉलिसी इंटरवेंशन क्यों नहीं है? क्यों आप केवल ये कह रहे हैं कि यस वी विल डबल फार्मर्स इनकम बाय 2019? वेयर आर द पॉलिसीज टू डबल द इनकम, राइट? This minister, agriculture minister, earlier Mr. Sharad Pawar ji, he was a man of power, right? Experience. The present I don't think you know the present agriculture minister, Radha Mohan Singh. Acha, you know, right? Because he belongs to Bihar, so maybe knowing. I know him personally. He has no potential and capacity to even increase 10% the farmers' income, and government is telling double. But yes, if government has to double, that requires huge investment. And so government has a plan to disinvest, right, the shares in profit-making public sector units, right? So that is also aspect of liberalization, right? Disinvesting, public sector units, right? Okay. Next feature of liberalization: decline in the role of state. Next feature of liberalization: decline in the role of state in provision of public social services. Decline in the role of state in provisions of public sector, public social services. This is also visible in society. Decline in the role of state in public social services. For example, yes, what we have seen, like now public-private partnership, right, for development of health infrastructure. In fact, private sectors like Max, right, Medanta, right, Fortis, right, these are all private sector, right? या फिर land allocation for, right, free land allocation for establishing Patanjali ka units, isn't it? Getting your point? Yeah, art of living ka units, Ayush medicine, right? Like, so these are examples कि government, like after globalization, right, this liberalization policy or liberalization is reflected in declining role of the state in provisions of public social services like health. In education, you see education now, there are many private universities in education. Government has facilitated these private universities by allocating land, by providing them tax break, by providing them funds. Likewise, आपका many NGOs, isn't it, right? Private NGOs, right, have now taken responsibility which earlier government used to do. For example, responsibility for implementing midday meal scheme has been given in many states to private NGOs, isn't it, right? Private, corporations, right? So public service, yeah, Akshay Patra, for example. So many, public social services, right, has now been outsourced to private, isn't it? This is also, after globalization, and this is feature of, liberalization, right? Okay. Further, future development through wider participation. एक और एस्पेक्ट है, नेक्स्ट लिख लीजिएगा, future development through wider participation of the private sectors and hence more dependence on the markets. Future development through wider participation of the private sector and hence more dependence on the market for exchange of goods and services. Future development through the wider participation of private sector and hence more dependence on the market for exchange of goods and services. After globalization, through policy of liberalization, right, it was indicated that future development, right, will take place with wider participation of private sectors, isn't it? Government will have, lower say, low say or no say, right? And the space will be taken by market forces. अभी आप देखिए, in exchange of goods and services, what we have seen, कि government has progressively receded, retrieved, right? And now goods, exchange of goods and services more and more influenced by markets, right? जैसे अभी एक जनरल एग्जांपल अभी दे रहा हूं, अभी जो विजुअल एग्जांपल है, गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज मार्केट बेस्ड एक्सचेंज, डायनामिक टिकटिंग सिस्टम एडॉप्टेड बाय रेलवेज, IRTS, राइट? मतलब ये अजीब, राइट? मतलब I don't know whether you travel or not. I am a regular commuter, right? And in budget 2014-15, government did not increase fare, but there are increase in fare to 40%. 40% तक का increase है in fares of Rajdhani and Duranto, right? 40%. Budget में government did not increase. In fact, अब तो budget ही खत्म कर दिया. लो, no railway budget, right? No railway budget, no discussion. Maybe कि by next year this annual budget will also be announced on 1st of January or 31st of December by Prime Minister, right? क्योंकि if government is oriented towards destructing all institutions, तो maybe planning commission के बाद अब budget का भी number आ जाए, right? कि budget will also be produced by introduced by Prime Minister office, and that too, on occasion of Deepavali or Dasahara, right? हाँ, दशहरा पे बजट, right? So what we have seen कि market forces, this dynamic ticketing system, right? Dynamic ticketing system कि now the price of railway tickets by market forces, isn't it? कि market में agents increases the demands, IRTS and other agents increases the demands, fare का price increases, isn't it? वैसा ही goods का exchange, like government has least control over the prices of pulse, right? Price of rice, pulse and other essential commodities. Though there are acts and laws, but those are ineffective because now market forces are playing wider role, more important role, right? And this is aspect of liberalization. ये aspect है liberalization का कि more and more market will influence exchange of goods and services between and among the people in society. Getting your point? So this एक influence हम क्या देखते हैं? Economic impact, liberalization, and these are different aspects of liberalization, right? I guess got okay. एक liberalization, privatization, very much related. Other economic impact is privatization, right? Privatization. In aspects में also the points which we have discussed, privatization is visible. Further, like privatization through public offering of shares. Privatization through public offering of shares. These both are related, liberalization and privatization. Public offering of share. All or part of the shares of public limited companies are offered for sale. All or part of public limited companies are offered for sale to the public or institutional investors, to the public or institutional investors. Second aspect of privatization, private sale of shares. Public offering of shares, pehla. Second, private sale of shares. Dash, all or part of the state owned enterprises. Private sale of shares, private sale of shares, dash, all or part of state owned enterprises is sold to private individual or a group of purchaser, is sold to private individual or group of purchasers. Third aspect of privatization is new private investment in a state owned enterprise, new private investment in a state owned enterprise. State owned enterprise. Next point, entry of the private sector into public sector. For example, entry of private sector into public sector, for example, जैसे banking, right? Private banks का entry, right? Entry of private power industries, isn't it? In power sector, fertilizer industries in fertilizer sector, isn't it? So there are many. This is also aspect of privatization. Important aspect of privatization. Other aspect of privatization, contracting out the services and utilities. Contracting out the services and utilities to private operators or contractors for operation and maintenance. Services and utilities, contracting out services and utilities to private sector, private operators or contractors for operation and maintenance, while retaining ownership right with the government, This is also aspect of privatization visible in Indian society, right? इसका example बताइए मुझे. Example. Catering in Indian railways, catering services outsourced to private operators, या फिर supply of water, right? Supply of water. Water treatment plant is now being established by private sector. Water treatment plant, Siemens, a very popular company, Japanese company, right, is now establishing water treatment plants, isn't it? Right. So these are outsourced. Water supply is still under governmental control, right? वो आपका MCD का काम है, Municipal Corporation of Delhi या फिर जल बोर्ड, right? जल बोर्ड, Delhi Jal Board, DJB, but they have contracted, they have outsourced, right? They have passed the contract to supply the water to private contractors. Control is of DJB, Delhi Jal Board, but these couriers, water couriers जो आप देखते हैं, आता है ना, जब पानी नहीं होगा तो आता है ना, right? अब that is in private sector, that has been outsourced to private sector. This is also aspect of like for services, outsourcing mid-day meal scheme, outsourcing to privates, isn't it? Getting your point? Yeah. Supply of textbook, government is responsible, but contracting to private supply of textbook, supply of bags, supply of cycle to students, right, to the privates, right? So this is aspect of other aspect of privatization is sale of government enterprises or public enterprises to the private parties, sale of public enterprises to private owners. This government has directly sold also, right? Many enterprises like Super Bazaar sold to Dainik Bhaskar, DB Group, Super Bazaar. ऐसा बहुत सारा एग्जाम्पल है. विल फाइंड कि डायरेक्ट सेल जिसको बोलते हैं कि डायरेक्ट कंपनीज वेर सोल्ड बाय द गवर्नमेंट टू प्राइवेट सेक्टर, राइट? फॉर एग्जाम्पल, ड्यूरिंग वाजपेयी रिजाइम मेनी enterprises, right, were sold. Videsh Sanchar Nigam Limited, Videsh Sanchar Nigam Limited sold to Tatas, right? या फिर आपका Balco sold to Starlight Industries. This is Ruya Brothers, Starlight Industries, Ruya Brothers, right? Abhi Ruyas were in very much news. Huh? Yeah, that was also of Ruya, right? Jessup and Dunlop was also of Ruya. Recently, Ruya Brothers owns SR Petroleum, and SR Petroleum was in huge loss, right? And since Ruyas are very close to a particular political party, during Vajpayee regime also they were close, so they bought many government entities like Balco. Balco was profit-making company which was bought by Ruya and sold by respected Pramod Mahajan ji, right? But he was seller in Vajpayee regime. He was seller actually, right? So he sold, and now they were overburdened by debt, institutional debt. So recently what we saw, ki Rustrom, a Russian company, Rustrom has bought SR. Government has facilitated in sale of SR to Rustrom, right? SR, Ruya Brothers owned company, was in huge loss, so that with the government support sold to Rustrom. अभी जो visit हुआ था ना पुतिन का, उसमें that was sold to Rustrom, right? Okay, so these are aspects of privatization, liberalization and privatization, right? Impact will count. Okay. Foreign direct investment is other aspect. ये भी आप mention कर सकते हैं. Foreign direct investment is also aspect of privatization and globalization of financial market. Foreign direct investment through financial collaboration, foreign direct investment through financial collaborations, through joint ventures and technical collaborations, through capital market and euro issues, through private placements and preferential allotment, through private preference and preferential allotment. Right. Other economic effect of globalization, we see interventions and intermediation in trade related issues of the World Trade Organization. Interventions, intermediation, right, in Indian society in trade related issues by the World Trade Organization, right, by the World Trade Organization. This is also one impact or effect of globalization, right? कि जो पहले like decisions were more sovereign in nature, trade commerce का decisions were more sovereign in nature, right? Now those decisions are influenced by, administered by World Trade Organization's guidelines, isn't it? Right? World Trade Organization's guidelines. So this is also economic effects or economic impacts of globalization on Indian society. Getting your point? Okay. Next is increased, number of multinational corporations or transnational corporations. Increased influence of multinational corporations and transnational corporation. अब ये सब आपके ऑब्जर्वेशन में है, इसमें बहुत एक्सप्लेनेशन की जरूरत नहीं है, लेकिन while writing effects of globalization, we do count, right, कि presence of large number of multinational corporations and transnational corporations in Indian society is, one effect or impact of globalization, right? Right. So presence of multinational corporations, transnational corporation, increased number of multinational, transnational corporation, and particularly their role in employment generation, because transnational corporation, multinational corporations, right, they work or they act in chain of enterprises, with chain of enterprises, right? Jैसे multinational corporation like PepsiCo, right? So PepsiCo under their brand has outsourced the bottling of Pepsi in different parts of India, right, Indian society, to different local enterprises, right? So what we see, they work in chain enterprise, isn't it? Chain enterprise. And with chain, in this chain of enterprise, they have created a lot of employment opportunities also. ऐसा नहीं है multinational corporations का presence only, but also creation of employment opportunities, right? Their role is there in creation of employment opportunities, right? Not only bottling production, but also, right, you will find like employment opportunities through network of distribution, right? Network of distribution, right? Network of retailing, right? So this is also economic effect or economic impact of transnational corporations, right, in Indian society, right? Okay, so this is also one economic effect. Infrastructure development. Post globalization, if you observe, right, post globalization in Indian society, there has been faster growth of infrastructure, be that transport infrastructure or educational infrastructure or health infrastructure, right? With liberalization, privatization, with resource mobilization, now government also, right, like national sovereign governments also have huge resources, right, with presence of multinational corporations, right, in the nation. With presence of multinational corporation, government or national governments have huge resources, and those resources are now being used for infrastructure development, infrastructure creation. For example, rural infrastructure. If you see, the government has spent thousands of crores, lakhs of crores on creation of infrastructure under Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, right? Transport infrastructure, isn't it? For connecting rural to urban, right? Golden Quadrilateral, right? East-West corridor, right? Expressways, highways, right? Flyovers, like increase in number of hospitals, specialty hospitals, right? Educational institutions, right? The number of IAMs. If you see, number of IAMs has increased manifold, right, after LPG, after globalization, because now resources are available to the government, and government invest those resources on creating infrastructure, right? Number of IITs, number of NITs, number of IIMs, number of AIMs, right, has increased manifold with availability of resources after globalization, right? So हम कहते हैं कि one economic effect, right, is creation or development of infrastructure, right? Growth and of infrastructure, right? Okay, expansion of information and communication technology. Expansion of information and communication technology. And development of a knowledge society. Development of information and knowledge society. Look, this is also important, impact or consequence of globalization, right? Look, ITC, information technology and communication, ITC, right, or information technology related enterprises, right, has grown up in Indian society, right, after globalization, because information technology and communication, ITC, are careers of, right, privatization and globalization. They are careers. They are referred as careers, isn't it? Right? For example, the services, or the after globalization, the new enterprises like Flipkart, right, Snapdeal, right? These retailers or these enterprises are working with the help of information and communication technologies, ITC. Getting your point, right? ITC, या फिर services to the public, right? Services like grievance redressal mechanisms, right? Through ITC, isn't it? Right. So, like one important, feature, or you can say, effect of globalization has been, growth of information technology in Indian society, information and communication technology in Indian society, because ITC is the carrier of globalization, isn't it? So the global forces like global multinational corporations, transnational corporations, they have promoted, growth and development of information technology. And Indian society today, right, is also referred as knowledge society. Indian society today referred as information society, right? Because in our society, right, today the preference, right, or the value is given to information technology, coded information, coded knowledge, mathematical knowledge, coded knowledge, because that is the means actually for change, right, and mobility. Those who are, graduated in IT, those who are graduated in computer technology, so they have, wider scopes to work. May not be that available to mechanical engineer or chemical engineer, but IT and computer engineers, right, those who with coded information, coded knowledge, those who can codify their knowledge and, develop softwares, isn't it? They have, wider opportunities, right? Look, today Bill Gates, right, or Zuckerberg, right, not owners of General Motors or owners of Ford Motors, right? आप जानते हैं who owns the Ford, who is CEO of Ford, who is MD of Ford, or General Motors, Chevrolet, who is MD of Chevrolet? You don't know, because in information age, in information society, the heavy industries have lost their significance. They have lost their significance. They are dependent on information technology. They are dependent on holders of information, right? They are dependent on, this Microsoft wala, they are dependent on Facebook, Zuckerberg to sell their product, to popularize their product, isn't it? Getting a point or not, right? So in Indian society also, what we have seen, a growth, in fact, explosion in information, in growth and development of information and technology, right? Information explosion, right? Growth of information technology, right? This is also one effect or impact, right? Every aspect of life you will find, every aspect, right, marred by IT, information technology. आप किसी भी aspect में चले जाइए, right? चाहे वो goods का exchange हो, services का exchange हो, between and among people, isn't it? Health, right? Health, education, right? Economy, right? Familial solidarity also now dependent, right? Now in modern society, there are change in forms and structure of family, separated families, right? Both husband and wife are working in two distant places, right? Husband posted in Nagaland, wife posted in, Punjab, right? So for communication, solidarity is based on communication, interaction, right? And dependence on technology, right? This app-based video calls or, other forms, technology, right? Every aspect of life today, right? This is also effect or influence. Every aspect of life today, right, dependent on or characterized by some dependency on information technology, IT, right? Software technology. This is also effect. ये भी effect है, right? Globalization का. पहले नहीं था. Globalization के पहले ऐसा नहीं था, right? Post globalization, every aspect of life characterized by, right, some piece of IT, some part of IT, right? Information technology is there in every aspect of life, right? चाहे आपको security चाहिए या survival चाहिए at the time of flood, at the time of, drought, isn't it? So every aspect, right? अभी देख लीजिए geotagging, MG Narega work. Government wants to bring transparency, so now ISRO is doing geotagging of Manrega sites, and through that geotagging, transparency is being ensured in Manrega works, MG Narega works, isn't it? Right? तो उधर देखिए, governments be dependent, administration dependent, right? members of society dependent on IT, right? So this is also one effect or consequences, you can say, of globalization, dependence on IT. Okay. Outsourcing of work and BPO boom, BPO opportunities, business process outsourcing opportunities, outsourcing of work and BPO boom. इस पॉइंट को समझिएगा, इसमें काफी सोशल एस्पेक्ट्स है. लाइक इफ आई आस्क यू कि who were the promoters of globalization, who promoted the process of globalization, who sponsored process of globalization? Yeah, multinational corporations are promoters, right? And through them, the process of globalization flourished, isn't it? Right? MNCs, multinational corporations, right? Private multinational corporations, not government, but private capitalist multinational corporations, PepsiCo or Coca-Cola or other, multinational corporations, be that General Motors or Ford or other. These multinational, Honda, multinational corporations, right? Hyundai, multinational, Samsung, Panasonic, Sony, multinational corporations, right? Transnational corporations, right? These corporations, promoted, these private corporations promoted, sponsored globalization, right? Number one. Number two, the private corporations, private capitalists, right? Private capitalist industry, they have, orientation towards profit making, profiteering, orientation towards profiteering. Bina profit ka koi kaam nahi karta, private industries, right? Profiteering, that is difference between private and public, right? Public industries, public sector focus on welfare, right? Common good, and private industries profit, right? Self good, right? Profit. They were, major parties. They became major parties in economic globalization, private corporations and all. They were oriented towards, profit making, and there are ways of making profit, right? Either high margin of profit or minimum cost of production, right? A high margin was not possible because of increased global competition among the corporators, right? High margin नहीं रह सकते. अगर कोका कोला का प्राइस 25 है तो मैक्सिमम आप 26 कर सकते हैं पेप्सी वाला, isn't it? Right? लेकिन if they will do 30 or 35 तो फेल हो जाएंगे, right? So private industries, focused on minimizing the cost of production for increasing or to increase their profit margin. And to minimize cost of production, outsourcing of work started. Right? For example, if multinational corporations are based in Mumbai, so cost of production may be high in Mumbai, labor cost may be high, so outsource the work from Mumbai to Pune. If Pune mein cost is high, to outsource the work from Pune to Aurangabad, right? I mean, outsourcing of work, isn't it, to minimize the cost of production? Getting a point? Business process outsourcing, one feature we see after globalization, important feature we see in Indian society after globalization, post-globalization. Business process outsourcing of work, right? What we see in most of the cases, right? Work is outsourced from formal to informal, because informal sector may cost of production or cost of services is low in comparison to formal sector, right? Because formal sector, statutory wages, all governments, rules, regulations, obligations. So what we see, private corporators, private, capitalists, right? Like Convergys, Genpact, isn't it? You'll find that they outsource many of their work or the work within organization to outside, right? For example, like Convergys that works 24/7, right? So it is their responsibility to arrange for the canteen or food for the workers, but canteen services outsourced to private sector, outsourcing of work, right? You will find, the collaborations, isn't it? Collaboration, important feature of work organization after globalization, and that because of outsourcing, right? One industry outsource work to other industry outsource work to tertiary industries, right? Outsourcing of work is important feature, particularly outsourcing of work from formal sector to informal sector, right? India may growth of informal sector has been faster than formal because of outsourcing of work from formal transnational corporate organization to informal organizations, right? Getting a point? ये point समझ में आया? This is also effect outsourcing of work, right? Particularly from formal to informal. One impact of globalization in Indian society, right? एक और बात है कि इंडिया में ध्यान दीजिएगा कि like when globalization started, when government opened the market, liberalized the trade industrial policies, right? Human resource availability was also not for growth of formal sector, right? Educated, skilled and trained human resource availability was not there for the multinational corporations and transnational corporations, right? So outsourcing of work was also one compulsion from formal to informal, right? एक तो उनका profit making notion था ही, right? That notion direct them to outsource the work from formal to informal to minimize the cost. Other aspect was कि here human resource skilled human resource availability was also very low, right? अभी तो number of IITs, number of NITs, private engineering colleges, all these started after 2008-9, isn't it? Number of IITs, NITs increased in UPA government, isn't it? That was their policy of increasing number of IITs, NITs, AIMS, etc., right? Otherwise, in 1991-92, the trained labor force or skilled labor force was not available, and that was also one factor, one cause of outsourcing of work from formal to informal, right? Okay. So these are economic aspect, economic effect you can count, right? एक और कि declined significance of agriculture, right, after globalization, decline in significance of agriculture, right, agricultural practices, right, after globalization, because, and also decline in entrepreneurial you can say decline in significance of agriculture, increased decline in economic significance of agricultural practices, right, after globalization, decline in economic significance of agriculture, occupational significance of agriculture, right, after globalization. Also one visible feature or consequence you can say of globalization, right? Why so? ऐसा क्यों? Because governments retrieved from their protective interventions under global obligations, right? Under global obligation, governments focused on subsidy, right? Decreasing subsidies, right? Many subsidies were decreased. So protective measures था in form of agricultural subsidy, right? Government retrieved from those agricultural subsidies, right? That was also cause of increasing unrest in agriculture, decline in income from agriculture, increased cost of agriculture, right? So that was also one economic consequence of agriculture. Baki increased economic or poverty or pauperization after globalization in form of displacement of small and marginal farmers as well as tribals. Large number of displacement of tribals as well as small and marginal farmers. Also effect of globalization, consequence of globalization, right? याद रखिएगा इसको. So these are all economic consequences. कितना हो गया list? I guess बहुत लंबा. हाँ? So because this is very important topic, right? ये आपसे पूछेंगे केवल एक ही, effects of globalization on family, effects of globalization on economy. आपको एक आंसर पूरा लिखना होगा इस पे, right? या फिर if they ask you to write essay, लिख डालिए पूरा essay लिख डालिए, 1000 words में. This is very popular topic for essay writing also in UPSC, right? Okay, now social dimension or social effect, social consequences of globalization. Social consequences में basically we talk, effects of globalization on family, right? Effects of globalization on family, and I guess that is understood. Social effects, social consequences of globalization, social effects or impact of globalization. Economic effect, impact हमने कर लिया, right? Now social effect, impact of globalization, right? तो impact or effect on family, family पे कैसा effect है? Change in form and functions of family, change in form and functions of family. Social effect of globalization, first we count effect on family, effect of globalization on family, effect on forms of the family and functions of the family, effect on forms of the family and functions of the family. Form, joint with increased migration from rural to urban, nuclearization of families started, right? Nuclearization of families started, joint to nuclear families, right? Effects on family, joint to nuclear families, right? Nuclearization of families, right? And with increased social mobility after globalization, with increase in social mobility after globalization, we have also seen emergence of multiple forms of families or new forms of families with increase in social mobility, right? Social mobility bole to movement, right? Movement from one place to other, horizontal mobility particularly, movement from one place to other place, right? Movements, increased movements, right? Like both husband and wife are working, for example, right? And both are, MDs or CEOs, right? In different companies, managers in different companies, right? So as per their official duties, both have to, move regularly from one place to other place, isn't it? And this referred as, separated families, new forms of families, right? Form may change, family ka form may change, joint family to nuclear family with migration, isn't it? From rural to urban, urban to urban, as well as new forms of families, emergence of new form of families, for example, separated families, right? Separated families. New form of family, like now in modern society, unmarried cohabitation, live-in relationship in metropolitan cities are also considered as a form of family. And this has also got acceptance, right? पहले क्या था society में acceptance was not there, isn't it? But now such families like unmarried cohabitation, live-in relationship also has got acceptance, isn't it? Getting your point. Other form of family like joint household families, right? After globalization, because of increased movement and mobility of people from rural to urban, right? Because urban centers are now centers of attraction because of growth of service sector as well as manufacturing, right? Trade and commerce, increased, growth of trade and commerce at urban places, isn't it? So now large mass of that has become, urban places has become a magnet which attracts people, isn't it? So large mass of population migrating, right? And with migration, there are also increasing, pressure on urban resources, right? Houses, housing, there are lack of a space in urban areas, right? So joint household families, number of joint household families increasing. People belong to different places, but they live like joint family, right? Under a common roof, share the common kitchen, and the factor behind it is holding the house. For example, अगर आप देखें, आप इधर मुखर्जी नगर में रहते होंगे, you have migrated from different places for education, ठीक है? Somebody from Punjab, Bihar, UP, MP, right? Tamil Nadu, different places say, right? And you hold a single flat, isn't it? You share common kitchen, right? Common roof, you stay under common roof, right? Share similar sentiment, emotion, isn't it? The most important factor and crucial factor right? Behind commonality, common kitchen, common roof, common sentiment is holding the house, right? Such, households are referred as joint household families, right, in sociological term. And this has increased actually after globalization. Post globalization mein joint household, families, the forms of families may change, right?
It's more of a need based.
Yes, need based, right? Functions of the family. Look, after globalization, right, there has been faster differentiation, right, of both services, right? For example, in urban settlements, in metropolitan societies, you will find early childhood care centers in large number, crèche, right? Early childhood care centers, pre-primary learning centers, right, where both husband and wife, both members of the family works outside, right, are working in private industries, in public industries. There, these alternative institutions, those are referred as functional alternatives. Earlier, these functions, caring of children, used to take place within family. Now there are functional alternatives after globalization, like Kidji, right? Kidji, right? And many such early childhood care centers you will find. So the functions, caring function of family has declined, right? Security function of the family is declining. Now insurance, right? Private insurance companies, right, under their pension schemes, takes care of retired old age people, isn't it? जो पहले caring का function family का था, that function is declining, right? Earlier in Indian society, families were unit of production as well as consumption, right? Now families are unit of consumption, production unit has shifted outside family, family के बाहर चला गया, right? Only consumptive concerns are the concerns of the family, right? Manufacturing in a specialized institutions outside family. Getting your point, right? So what we have seen, ki post globalization, in fact, technological innovation, surrogacy and all, the reproductive function of family is also now being outsourced. Surrogate mothers, surrogacy ka practice, technology is there, right? Surrogacy ka practice is there. Surrogacy has been legalized also, isn't it? So the functions of the family, what we have seen, is declining in Indian society after globalization, right? Both forms and functions of the family has declined after globalization in Indian society. Getting your point, right? Okay. Particularly those belong to, have observation of metropolitan culture, you will see a lot of changes in family caste structure, isn't it? Right? Like preferences for lesser number of children, value may change, isn't it? Traditional society may large number of children or family ka size, joint, isn't it? But now there are growing preference for lesser number of children. Why? Because of increased mobility, right? Increase in cost of, education, right? Increase in cost of child rearing. Now dependency for rearing the child is there on alternative institution. The institutions available in the market, the institution which is paid for, isn't it? Right. So preferences are there for lesser number of children, right? So now there are change, right? Change is what we see in family caste structure, in family functions, change. Now caring the children is not the function of the family, but earlier this was important function of the family. Getting a point, right? And it was, particularly post globalization, where now options are available for child caring, child rearing, options are available. And since child caring and child rearing has become, costly affair, right? So now families are preferring for, lesser number of child. Earlier children were resource, right? Because they used to work in the fields. But now it is responsibility of the family to make children's human resource by educating them, by training them, right? So that involves cost of education and cost of training, isn't it? So families' preferences are not for number of children, isn't it? But focus on education, skill, training, because now vocation is based on a specialized education. Occupations are available on the basis of a specialized education, isn't it? And post-globalization may, if you observe in society, you will find all these changes in Indian society, right? Because of, these externalities, these factors, right? Okay. एक और सोशल जो इफेक्ट हम देख रहे हैं इंडियन सोसाइटी में आफ्टर ग्लोबलाइजेशन, पोस्ट ग्लोबलाइजेशन इफेक्ट, राइट? That is deterioration in condition of labor reforms and deterioration in condition of labor, right? Laborers are left on the market forces. Their fate are shaped, decided by market forces, right? So this is other social impact. This is other social impact. Post globalization or after globalization, government in Indian society, successive governments have liberalized the labor laws, right? Has strengthened bargaining capacity of the transnational corporation and multinational corporation, increase in wages, right? Your job security, job tenure is all on discretion of, yes, the owner, the capitalist, isn't it? The industrialist, right? This is, security of tenure is not fixed. It's upon performance. Till you perform, you continue. Otherwise, you are fired. Getting a fine, right? So what we have seen, post globalization, right, the labor reforms has deteriorated the condition of labor, and that we see, in form of labor unrest in Maruti ka plant, right? Ab Manesar mein, that was reported in news because their laborers killed HR manager, right? Otherwise, you will find regular protests and movements. I see regular protests and movements when I travel to Dehradun, in between, near that Sidkul. Regularly, I see laborers protesting against, sometimes against Honda, sometimes against, Starlight, different, such multinational corporations, such capitalist corporations, protest of laborers, right? Movements. Why? Because their condition has deteriorated. Low hike in wages, low remuneration, isn't it? No safety and security measures, right? Mostly, post globalization, because of reform in labor laws, right? Corporations outsource, recruitment of the laborers, right? They hire laborers and workers on contracts, right? And that also through consultancies, right? They don't take responsibility of the health, the education, and other, benefits of the worker and labor, right? They hire them through consultancy on contract for a specific tenure, and that too with, conditions, isn't it? And all these, have deteriorated and caused the exploitation of labor, which sometimes manifest in form of, protest and movements in society, right? Okay. Other social effect after globalization is feminization of labor. Feminization of labor. One social effect or social impact or consequence, feminization of labor. What do you mean by, this was question also asked. एक question पूछा था UPSC ने, right? इस पे question already been asked in paper 1. So what do you mean by feminization of labor? This is now very much in usage. देखिए, इसको डिफाइन जब करना हो ना, तो इसको हम डिफाइन करते हैं फेमिनाइजेशन ऑफ लेबर को थियोरेटिकली, कंसेप्चुअली, increased participation of women in labor force. Increasing participation of women in labor force refers to feminization of labor. Increasing participation of women in labor force refers to feminization of labor. Right? In post-global society, there are many reasons for feminization of labors, right? First, look, जैसे आपके ऑब्जर्वेशन में भी है, after globalization in Indian society, there has been faster growth of service economy, right? Service economy, tertiary economy, right? Service sector, right? And also, referred soft economy, right? Software sector, soft economy, software sector, right? Differentiation, growth of software sector, soft economy, service economy, right? And in these aspects of work organization, like software industry, IT industry, service industry, like hotels, right? Transport, like growth of aviation sector, right? Hotels, right? आपका जिसको कहते हैं hospitality sector, isn't it? Growth in hospitality sector, growth in aviation sector, right? Growth in health sector, right? Growth, right? And expansion of IT industries, information technology sector, right? All these sectors have facilitated more and more women to take occupational positions, right, outside domestic sphere, isn't it? Right? Because these sectors are more compatible for women, isn't it? Because all these sectors involves expressive roles, right? Expressive role or soft role, not hard works, isn't it? Right? Servicing ka role, service, right? Second, other factor ki be that aviation, or be that hospitality, or be that IT industry, software industry, right? In all these sector, growth has been promoted, sponsored by private sector, right? Private sector, and private sector has profit motive, profit orientation, right? And women, for women there are differential wages in any society, केवल नहीं Indian society में नहीं, even in European and American society में, there are differential wages, isn't it? Differential wages for women or low wages for women, isn't it? Right? Because women ka wage considered as supplementary income for the family, so women are also ready to work below the statutory wages to minimize the cost of production, right? To minimize the cost of production, these sectors also preference is given to women because women are ready to work at lower wages, right? Their income considered as supplementary income to the family, so they don't bargain, and right, this is the important. Third is informalization, right? Informal sector, informalization of work organization after globalization, right? Many of the tasks outsourced from formal to informal sector after globalization, household sector after globalization, domestic sector after globalization, isn't it? And this work from home culture has become popular after globalization and has got popularity through outsourcing of work from formal to informal, formal to domestic sphere, online, right? Work is outsourced to the families, domestic sphere mein, isn't it? And women take work in those informal sectors, right? Those outsourced work, right, given to women. Post globalization, with growth of informal sector and low education, low skill, low training among women, has also caused increased participation of women in informal labor force. Increased participation of women in informal labor force, because informal sector provides easy entry for women at low wages, isn't it? Easy entry for women at low wages with low skill, low education and low training, isn't it? So post globalization, what we have seen, increased participation of women in informal sector. Also because of after post globalization, right, because of growth of infrastructure development like metros, transport and all, right, industries, there has been male migration from rural to urban, right? And with migration of males from rural to urban metropolitan cities, women have taken agricultural activities, agricultural work, right? So feminization of labor has also taken in form of feminization of agriculture, because of migration of male from rural to urban, isn't it? So these are aspects, right? These are visible aspects or consequences in society after globalization, feminization of labor, right? Okay. After globalization, there is also increase in relative poverty. देखिए, absolute poverty भले ना बढ़ा हो, absolute poverty has decreased, right? But there is increase in relative poverty, right? Why? Because these forces of globalization, factors of globalization has benefited more to educated class than the uneducated illiterate class, has benefited more to urban areas than the rural areas, right? So relative poverty has increased, right? The benefits has been cornered by the few, not by the all, right? So what we see, if there are low improvement and no improvement in condition of farmers, low or no improvement in condition of wage earners, low or no improvement in condition of workers in the factories, in companies, isn't it? But economic fate, economic status of industrialists, capitalists, entrepreneurs, isn't it, right, had changed manifold after globalization, isn't it? The benefits has been cornered by few, not shared equally by all, right? This has also, globalization has caused wealth concentration in hands of few. आप देख लीजिए, right? Post globalization, right? These entrepreneurs, be that Infosys wala or Azim Premji or Flipkart, right? Wealth concentration of wealth, right, in a particular class, not distribution among the mass. Since government also has retrieved from their distributive roles, right, after globalization, distributive justice, role of government in distributive justice, economic distributive justice has declined, isn't it? People are most exposed, right, before market forces, isn't it? That has also caused increase in relative inequality, relative poverty, right? आप देखते होंगे ना कि ग्लोबलाइजेशन के बाद you will find कि some region, this was post globalization, that in 90s Maoist movement, right, was limited in select districts before 90s, means started in late 60s, right, spread in 70s, and in 70s it was controlled also in Bengal, right? 80s में static, 90s में इसका expansion, right, you will find Maoism का spread like starting in Naxalbari district in 60s, late 60s or early 70s, you can say late 60s में, and its expansion took place in states of Jharkhand, in a state of Bihar, in a state of Odisha, in a state of Andhra, right, after globalization, right, right, in Chhattisgarh after globalization, in Maharashtra after globalization, because of increased relative poverty and deprivation. Increased relative poverty and deprivation, and people relative poverty means people are not in absolute poverty, they are relatively poor, and they have realization कि globalization or the government, corporations, right, is benefiting to the have class, not to the have not class, isn't it? They have this awareness, relatively deprived, relatively poor people, they have awareness of their constitutional rights, equality, freedom, justice, liberty, they have awareness of these values, but they find themselves excluded, isn't it, right, because of such processes, isn't it, because of differential governmental intervention, differential government. So they are discontented and distressed, and that distress manifest in form of both violent and non-violent, right? So violent means may manifestation in form of these, right? Likewise, extremism also has increased, isn't it, after globalization, right? Globalization because of inequality, relative inequality, increasing relative inequality, increasing relative poverty, right? Okay. That also, right? Social impact make social consequences may exploitation of the excluded sections, right, like women, right? Clinical trials, surrogacy and all, exploitation, right, of women, threat to women's life, right? That also. Other, urbanization, the faster growth of urban settlements, expansion of urban settlements, or you can say urban sprawl, right? Theoretically, expansion of urban areas are referred as urban sprawl, SPRAWL, urban sprawl, right? Post globalization, we have seen faster urban sprawl, right? And with urban sprawl, slumization of urban centers, as well as growth and development of squatter settlements. Slumization of urban centers as well as growth of squatter settlements. Slum, so you understand, right? Slumization, right? Concentration of population, right? With with dilapidated housing in a particular place, isn't it? Right, housing conditions are dilapidated, lack of civic amenities, lack of civic facilities, like water, lighting, electricity, isn't it? Education, all lacks in slum areas. Right, housing is dilapidated condition, high concentration of population, not only, and slums are permanent, right? Slums are permanent. जैसे इधर आप ट्रेवल करेंगे किंग्सवे कैंप की तरफ, तो you'll find a slum near outram lines, isn't it? Outram line. There are also no growth of squatter settlements, right? Just if you go from here, right, you will find a squatter settlements near outer ring, means both sides of outer ring road, right? Squatter settlements are settlements squattered around the urban settlements, right? Squatter settlements. If you travel to Greater Noida, you will find many squatter settlements in between Greater Noida and Delhi, right? So squatter settlements also, right, has no legal status, right? Lack of civic amenities, lack of electricity, lack of water supply, right? Slums are permanent, squatter settlements are not permanent, non-permanent, isn't it? This is the only difference between both, right? And there has been faster growth of squatter settlements as well as slums because of faster urbanization, this urban sprawl, isn't it? There has been gap between the civic amenities and the facilities, urban facilities, and increase in population, and that is also referred as over urbanization, right? So over urbanization is also one social effect after globalization, particularly in metropolitan cities. Over urbanization, right? One consequence after of globalization, one effect of globalization after, particularly in metropolitan cities, right? Okay. एक और social consequence में you can count, and that is also very visible consequence, right? Visible impact, right? Commercialization of indigenous knowledge. इसका मतलब, yes, commercialization of indigenous knowledge, for example yoga, right? Or Ayush medicines, Ayurveda, right? Meditations, right? All these, commercialization of indigenous knowledge. Commercialization of indigenous knowledge. And now what we see, not only commercialization of indigenous knowledge, but monopolization of indigenous knowledge also, right? With the help of world bodies like World Intellectual Property, WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, right? US and many, developed countries has monopolized indigenous knowledge, right? जैसे turmeric का, basmati rice, turmeric, isn't it? Those belong to indigenous people of India, but uska monopoly of the companies, transnational corporations, isn't it? Right. So this is also one effect. We count it as a social effect in commercialization of indigenous knowledge, isn't it? Loss of control of indigenous people over their indigenous, resources, right? Indigenous resources, right? जो medicinal plants है, for example, right? तो medicinal plants पे the first right is of the tribals in tribal areas of Uttarakhand or tribal areas of Jharkhand, isn't it? जो medicinal plants हैं in Uttarakhand, right? तो first right किसका है उसपे? जौनसारी tribes का, बावर tribes का, isn't it? Those tribes, but they have lost their right to the multinational corporation, transnational corporation, those who have got monopoly, right? Those who have acquired monopoly, isn't it? Through intellectual property organizations, isn't it? And has commercialized this indigenous knowledge, isn't it? So this is also, social effect of globalization, right? Okay, fine. Cultural consequences, like economic consequences, social consequences, cultural. Cultural में education, religion and all we will discuss, right, its consequences, right? Before we discuss cultural consequences, a small, discussion like effect on what we see. We see effect of globalization also on sovereignty of the nation states, isn't it? Nation states, right? Like nation states, many nation states have lost their sovereignty, right, to the international organization, or compromised with sovereignty because of international compulsions, right? Like decisions of Indian government, right, policy decisions, right, of Indian government, also now after globalization, influenced by the compulsions of international agreements, isn't it? The compulsions of international agreements, right, international directives, right? For example, abhi recently India ratified Paris climate talks. हमने ratify किया, now we are party in that, right? मोदी जी ने अपना international पर्सनालिटी को दिखाने के लिए, इंटरनेशनलिज्म को दिखाने के लिए रेटिफाई कर दिया, right? But India is not in position to compromise with its growth and development, right? India has lack of resources, right, for adopting green technology, right? India के पास अभी उतना रिसोर्स नहीं है कि we will go for green technology के लिए जाएंगे, right? And if we ratify such agreements, right, then we will have to compromise with our developmental agenda for creation of employment, right? हम employment कैसे generate करेंगे? We cannot make India successful, right, with green technology because we don't have resources, isn't it? हम green technology को इधर या governments का, not only this government, unilaterally, right, government of India declared National Action Plan on Climate Change, right? And that program, required billions of rupees ka investment, isn't it? But if government, diverts the funds for clean technology, then there will be compromise with, welfare agenda, isn't it? So what we have seen, national government, including Indian government, has compromised with their national interest, right? Had compromised with their sovereignty, right? Sovereignty which lies in the people. Governments has compromised with sovereignty because of international obligations after globalization, isn't it? Because of global pacts, isn't it? Right? Membership in global organizations, isn't it? This we refer as a political effect, isn't it? Political effect, right, on Indian society, right? Okay. Further, cultural, right? Cultural effect, right? जैसे cultural में we'll talk education, right? Now increased significance post globalization, what we have seen in Indian society, increased significance of technical education, isn't it? Technical education, professional education, right? Technical education, professional education, and decline in value education, human and value education, professionalization, focus on technical education, right? Other effect is commercialization of education, right? Increased, penetration of private sector in educational sphere. The education, right, which is a social responsibility, right, of the government, right? Constitution directs the state to make policies and to ensure education, right? A spread of education. There are constitutional directive and it is constitutional responsibility, right? RTE, right? 21A mentioned in Constitution, isn't it? But what we have seen continuously after globalization, right? There has been commercialization of education, isn't it? Right? Successive governments have failed in increasing number of, seats in government educational institutions, right? It is not proportionate to the increasing number of population and demographic changes in Indian society, isn't it? The role of government has been outsourced to private sector, isn't it? Right? And because of commercialization, there has also been, increase in educational exclusion as well as educational disparity, right? Quality wise, disparity, educational disparity, right? Between rural and urban, between high class and low class, between tribe and non-tribe, men and women. Educational disparity should have decreased, but if we have seen educational disparity has increased after globalization. Post globalization, increase in educational disparity, right? Okay. Further, we see increased pace of cultural penetration. Increased pace of cultural penetration or globalization of the culture, or effects of global culture, right, in Indian society, right? What we have is our culture. Culture is defined all art, artifacts, things, right, values, norms, institutions which we have is our culture, right? Broadly, culture is divided into material culture and non-material culture. And art and culture आपको पढ़ना है ना पेपर 1 में, उसमें डिटेल में पढ़िएगा ये. Like culture is divided into material and non-material, right? All art, artifacts, etc. part of material culture, like this table, chair, computer, right, laptops, part of material culture, right? And knowledge, values, norms, part of non-material culture. So material culture, non-material. What we have seen, faster change, right? Change, substantial change, tangible change, right? After globalization in both material as well as non-material culture. Now in Indian society, there are range of material culture. The range of material culture has increased, right? Range of material culture has increased, isn't it? Range of, non-material culture has increased. The knowledge system has increased, isn't it? Right? There has been, penetration of, isko kehte hain penetration of, global culture, foreign culture in Indian society, right? Ab iska jo consequence hua hai, the consequences are both functional as well as dysfunctional. Consequences are both functional as well as dysfunctional. Functional consequences ye hai ki growth and development of hybrid culture, right? Growth and development of hybrid culture, cultural diversity, right? Diversity. But also there has been, increase in cultural nationalism, right? Reaction. India is a society characterized by diversity of ethnicity, right? Diversity of religion, right? Diversity of ethnicity, diversity of religion, diversity of regions, right? And this global culture, right, has threatened, right, ethnic, religious, regional cultures. Global culture has also threatened ethnic, religious, and regional cultures. And we also have seen, protest movements, isn't it, against cultural globalization in form of many protests and movements, isn't it? Protests and movements, right? World over अगर हम count करते हैं ना, cause of rise of fundamentalism, right? So one cause of rise, not only in India, world over, right? One cause has been imposition of global culture, global ways and methods in ethnic local societies. In ethnic local societies, right? For example, अगर आप देखिएगा Iraq, Americans imposed democracy from above, right? Americans, imposed democracy from above, right? In European societies, democracy, or democratization, process of democratization started with 1789 का French Revolution, right? And who revolted? The commoners, common man, right? Commoners. First state clergy, second state lords, right? Land lords, feudal lords, isn't it? They were in minority. Majority of the population, the commoners का state, peasants, artisans, farmers, traders, they, revolted against the monarchy, the autocratic authoritarian government, isn't it? And monopoly of these two estates, right? Right? And democracy became successful in Europe, in India also, if you see, though here also mobilization earlier against British rule, mobilization of the class in first, round of national movement, you will see class mobilization. But with entry of Gandhi, Gandhi mobilized the masses, right? Peasants, farmers, laborers, all mobilized by Gandhi, right? So from root, the last man was mobilized by Gandhi for their self-rule, isn't it? Right? So democracy became successful, right? But in Iraq, democracy imposed from above, right? Right? By force, right? They replaced, by force. Saddam Hussein was replaced by force, isn't it? Force ke saath replaced and establishment of democracy, right? But the people were not ready to accept, so reaction in form of ISIS, right? ISIS ka fundamentalism, isn't it? Right? That culture, democratic culture, people were not ready, isn't it? People were not socialized, not trained, right? They did not had, their grievances for democratic rights and all imposed from above, reaction in form of ISIS ka crisis, right? ISIS ka fundamentalism, right? So this is like the same thing, right? In a society, right? Indian society also, diverse society, right? What do we see? Ki globalization has benefited few, not the all. The forces of globalization has not equally benefited to both tribals and non-tribals. So post-globalization, we see, reaction among tribals. Tribals ka, protest and movement against Indian states, against the global, multilateral, transnational corporations, isn't it? POSCO ka, protest, right? Vedanta ka protest. POSCO was protested, Vedanta was protested, and many multinational corporations were protested, closed, right? Blasted by by Maoists, right? Why? They reacted against. This is, reaction, cultural reaction. They were not ready for that and reacted, isn't it? So what we see, right? This global cultural penetration has also developed consciousness against and has given rise to ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is a concept. It refers to obsession for our own culture. Obsession for our own culture is referred as ethnocentrism. Obsession for own culture, right, referred as ethnocentrism. Many religious groups, many cultural groups had, after globalization has reacted, isn't it, returned and are obsessed for their own culture against global culture, globalization, isn't it? आप देखेंगे अभी सोसाइटी में रिवाइवल, राइट? रिवाइवल पोस्ट ग्लोबलाइजेशन आप काउंट करिए. टुडे इन इंडिया there are more than 220 channels dedicated to religion, spirituality, right? Religion, right? Day before yesterday, I saw in through social media, Prime Minister also attended, right? आदि योगी सदगुरु, राइट? वो पूरा मतलब ऐसा ऑरा क्रिएट किया हुआ है जैसे I mean something heavenly is happening, right? That is a means to mobilize, money and resources, right? I don't know, millions of rupee would have been donated to the Adi Guru through that program, and Prime Minister also, played crucial role in mobilizing the resources for the Mr. Isa. कौन है वो? Adi Guru. Sadguru ji, yes, he's a knowledge person, I respect him, right? लेकिन rise of these, gurus, right? Increase in, number of followers of these gurus after globalization is also a form of ethnocentrism or assertion for our own culture. Otherwise, in a Dravidian society of Tamil Nadu, Dravidians, right, during British period, even before national movement, were mobilized against Brahminic dominance, right? They were mobilized against Hinduism. Dravidians don't follow Hindu codes. वो नहीं follow करते हैं because they consider Hindu culture as Brahminic culture, and Brahminic culture had been cause of exploitation of Dravids in Tamil Nadu, right? बहुत extreme exploitation था, right? Dravids women in many parts of Tamil Nadu were not allowed to cover their full body. They were not allowed to use the village roads. Dravidians were not allowed to enter into village roads, right? Their shadow was also considered as polluting. Brahmins used not, they were banned to, they were allowed to travel outside only during midday, before sunrise or after sunset, because their shadow was also considered as polluting, right? But in that society too, what we see, with a mix of, just say, Shiva, black, ekdam black sculpture, right? Black, and that black is, symbol of Dravids. Dravidians are blacks, isn't it? So थोड़ा modify किया Hindu religion को उन्होंने, Hinduism को black बनाया, Shiva को pure black बनाया, and mobilized Dravids. Dravids में, revival. Earlier Dravidians believed in Hinduism, but because of, Periyar's movement, right? Dravidian movement started and spread under Mr. Periyar, isn't it? Right? Periyar at the time of independence was put behind bars, right? Because he propagated, if Dravidians have option to kill between a cobra and a Brahman, so kill first Brahmans, not the cobra, because Brahmans is more dangerous than cobra, right? So because of such propagation of Periyar was put behind bar, and he was wrong also, because not Brahmins but Brahmanism, Brahminic Hinduism was cause of exploitation, not the individual. Individual is never responsible. That ideology, Brahminic Hinduism, was cause of exploitation of Dravidians, and Periyar propagated to act of violence against Brahman, so he was put behind bars under Sedition Act, isn't it? Sedition Act by Nehruji, right? So in that society also we see, my point is, in that society also, the society which had protested against Brahminic Hinduism, in that society we are witnessing revival of the culture, Hindu culture and tradition, in form of this Adi Mahadev ka, ceremony celebration, in which lakhs of people, participated, isn't it? My point is that post-globalization, we have seen religious revivalism in Indian society. Religious revivalism. And that is, one aspect of cultural assertion, isn't it? Ethnocentric assertion against, global culture of materialism. Global culture of materialism. Globalization, promotes materialism, promotes consumption, isn't it? Consumption of materialistic culture, isn't it? Against that, rise of a spiritualistic culture, rise of, spiritualism, revival of religion, right, is a reaction against globalization and globalism in Indian society. Such reactions are more violent, right, characterized by terrorism in Middle East societies, in African societies, against global forces, against global values, against global norms, against global institutions, right? Reaction we see in Middle East countries also, revival of religion in form of fundamentalism, right, against, forces of globalization, right? Okay. Development of hybrid culture is also effect of globalization. Development of hybrid culture. What we see in today's society, a hybrid culture, right? They say, and processes like McDonaldization, right? I mean, this chain of global food chain, global dress chain, right? Global dress chain, food chains, isn't it? Global, educational institutions, global educational certifications, isn't it? These have, played important role, right? Particularly these retailers and all, global retailers played important role in growth and development of hybrid culture, right? You will find modification in, right, the McDonald's products in US and even in India. In India, that is modified as per the local, isn't it? Local tastes, isn't it? Just a pizza. Pizza is an Italian product, right? Is not of that quality. US ka quality, right? That pizza, Italian, no use of spice, right? In pizza, particularly mirchi, कोई use नहीं. Chili powder का no use, but Indian pizza में added chilies, right? This is, hybrid. This is hybrid culture. culture of Italy and culture of India. Indian culture, in Indian culture we have preference for spicy, isn't it? Right? So you will see modification of European food habits, American food habits, American dress code, just Indo-Western dress during marriage, preferred Indo-Western, something of West and something of India. This is, example of hybrid culture. What we have is our culture, our food habits, our dress code is all part of culture, all aspect of culture. So what we see in today's society, right, growth of hybrid culture, isn't it, in Indian society? And that is also one effect of globalization, right? जैसे मतलब lot of modification we'll see in foreign का fast foods and all. जो European foods है, जब आप जाते हैं खासकर small towns में, I don't know whether you visit small towns or not, लेकिन मैं काफी घूमता रहता हूँ, विजिट करता हूँ, तो I see, कि small towns में जैसे क्या है, तो this is popular burger, लेकिन वो बर्गर देखने से आपको लगेगा कि that is नाजायज औलाद of burger, right? I mean dangerous burger, right, with all chili and what I mean to say, will find modification, right? Modification you will find, right, in those foods. That is hybrid, right? Something of global and something of local. Getting your point? Hybrid culture, right? Okay. So these are effects of globalization. These are effects of globalization: economic, social, cultural effects of globalization, right? Okay. Fine. Social, economic, political, cultural, right? ये सब हमने देख लिया, right? Political sovereignty, compromise with sovereignty, right? That is right. एक और शायद मैंने brief किया होगा आपको, like unsustainable growth and development, right? Sustainability had been important, aspect of Indian culture, right? Sustainability lies in our cultural traditions. आप cultural traditions of India देखिए, local cultural traditions देखिए, right? जैसे in J&K, hammam, right? Use of hammam for warming as well as, for heating water as well as warming the rooms, right? That is, sustainable. That is part of, sustainable culture, isn't it? कि उसमें electricity का loss is not there and right, coal is not used, right, and all. So sustainability, right, woods का use, right, जो कि recycled है and all. Sustainability, you will find sustainability in Indian cultural tradition, in writings, Gandhian writings, या फिर in Buddhism, Jainism, right? You will see profession for sustainability, continuity, isn't it? This global culture, right, promotes unsustainable wage and methods. Global culture, right, globalization focus on increase in production and productivity, right, even at the cost of environment, or least concerned about environment, right? आप देखिएगा कि जितना global, if you compare global bodies, right, तो global bodies में activism of IMF, activism of World Bank, activism of all these bodies are higher than United Nations Environment Protection Organization, UNEP, right? उसका आप कब देखेंगे activism, isn't it? World countries, in different platforms, be that G8, United Nations, BRICS, IBSA, they talk more about increasing growth, development, economic, not and least concerned about environmental preservation, conservation, isn't it? हाँ, कुछ बोल रहे हैं आप? हाँ. Yes.
Environment again is a global problem. How can you say that people will not identify?
वही नहीं, environment global problem है, लेकिन like concerns of the Indians compromised because of global obligations, right? What we see, like this environmental aspect में कि now these multinational corporations and all, since they are oriented towards profit making, profiteering, so they are least concerned about loss of environment or dilapidation of environment, more concerned about maximizing their profit, isn't it? Profiteering, right? So compromise with environmental concerns, isn't it? In Indian society, right, where mountains had been worshipped, rivers worshipped, trees worshipped, isn't it? Right, every aspect of life you will find, conservation in that society, right? The focus on consumer culture, conspicuous consumption, right? Wasteful consumption, conspicuous consumption, wasteful consumption, isn't it? Right, that has environmental consequences. Wasteful consumption, environmental consequences, right? जैसे conspicuous consumption, conspicuous consumption actually had not been a feature of Indian society, but now what we see, this globalization has promoted conspicuous consumption, wasteful consumption, consumption to show off, right? Okay, so this is also consequence we can count, consequence of globalization.